Welcome to part 4 of the entire plot of Queen of Shadows, where we will be talking about everything that has happened in the Throne of Glass series up until chapter 44 of Queen of Shadows. Of course, we will not be spoiling anything after that in case this is only as far as you have read. I'm also going to remember to sit to the side so that when my photos pop up, I'm not like hiding behind them. Let's start where we left off in chapter 34, Aylin's POV. She's actually showing Rowan around where she grew up. Not necessarily the bestest of memories, but she does have some good memories worth sharing. So she's just showing him around the parts of the city that she actually likes. And she's also using this time to kind of utilize Rowan's face senses to kind of sense out how much Valg influence is in different soldiers. Now I will remind you that although he's in this anti-magic triangle and he doesn't have his magic, his Fey senses are also muffled, but they're still there. So he can sense out the Valg soldiers a little better than Aylin herself. As they're doing their little tour and walk through memory lane, Aylin decides to show him the theater. Now remember, this is the same exact theater that in, I believe it was Air of Fire, or was it Crown of Midnight? It was one of those two, but you remember, actually now that I'm saying that, it's Crown of Midnight. The Eoway people in the salt mines revolted when they heard that Nehemia had been killed. And then in order to like kind of squash any ideas the king had, all of the Eoway people in that salt mine prison camp murdered. And then the conductor, as well as all the people who played in the orchestra at this theater in Rifthold, they wore mourning black, and they actually played, I believe, like some sort of tribute to Eoway. Like they played like a mourning song basically. And the king was so upset that the entire theater the next day was shut down and no one saw the conductor or any of the orchestra players ever again after that. In other words, he had them killed. This is also why Madame Florence from the previous part, when we talked about she was the dance instructor who helped Aylin, she mentioned that a big part of her kind of turning against the king and starting to be on the side of the rebels is after what happened to her friend who was the conductor. So there we go. We just connected a bunch of strings for you. But Aylin decides to show that place to Rowan, and she talked about how she used to sit in the box with Arabin, and then how when her and Sam left the Assassin's Keep and she didn't have the money to necessarily sit in there, she would like hide up in the rafters and listen from there. Sure enough, they're walking around this abandoned theater as Aylin is reminiscing, and there's an old piano. Of course, it is horribly out of tune, but she mentions how playing piano isn't the same for her. She does share about like the music that Sam got her and how music was always something so special to her, but now it's something that kind of reminds her of everything that she's lost. And Rowan actually encourages her to play at this old abandoned out of tune piano, and she actually plays the song that was on the sheet music that Sam got her in Assassin's Blade. That means she memorized it. For those of you who are not musicians out there, memorizing a piece of music like that and being able to play it from memory after not touching it for forever is actually extremely impressive. So there you go. There's a little musician insight for you if you've never played an instrument before. People like have to train to do that. Like I had to train for years to be able to play music by memory. It's a lot. So she plays the song that Sam bought her for Rowan, and he absolutely loved it. And then he actually sits down at the piano with her and asks her to, you know, teach him a little bit about playing the piano. So they spend probably up to an hour there, and then they hear someone like starting to look around the grounds, because I'll remind you, this is an abandoned theater, so they're not exactly supposed to be there. So once they hear like someone's coming to inspect what the noise is, they book it out of there on their way back to the apartment, but they make one stop at the bank. Notice Aylin's making a lot of stops at the bank recently. But she goes in and she tells Rowan to stay outside and wait for her. She goes in and she brings some gold back out. And this is when Rowan realizes Aylin has been paying for her and him and Adian and all of them out of pocket in the apartment and all of that. So he's basically like, hey, so like what's the plan for funding? Because like an army isn't free, and you're spending all of your savings and money right now trying to get us just like food and clothing and a place to live. And all she says is, you'll find out soon. Girl, she loves to keep her secrets. What did I tell you? She loves to keep her secrets. Chapter 35, this is Kale's POV. Him and a group of rebels just did their typical ambush and rescue of accused magic wielders and accused magic sympathizers, and they loaded them up on a boat and sent them away. I don't think we ever learn where they're sending them to. We just know that the rebels have connections at the docks and they're sending them somewhere. They just rescued some of those, and while they're like waiting for all these people to load up onto the docks, Kale turns to Nesrin and asks her on a date. This is crazy because although they're together, they're very much just friends with benefits. Like, they're not, like, romantically involved in any way. So Nesrin actually, like, thinks he's joking at first, and she's like, oh, like, you actually want to spend time with me? She does make a snobby comment, as she should, frankly, that usually when they just hang out, he's, like, complaining about Aelin or something, and he's like, no, like, I actually want to spend time with you. And she's like, okay, so long as you're buying rounds, like, I'll go out with you. Now, this is a crazy part. Kale's in a good mood because he just decided to ask Nesrin on a date, and she decided to say yes. And they're loading up the last of the rebels into the boats when one of the other rebel leaders, who's kind of more the leader around the docks area, because I'll remind you that Kale is a rebel leader, but only in a specific area. So there's multiple rebel leaders, and this is another one. He makes an insane suggestion that absolutely knocks the breath out of Kale. And let me just tell you why. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory why this is Kale's worst nightmare. But he says, what if we just surrendered Aderlin? Like, Aderlin's lost. What if we just surrender it? What if we all just went to Terrasen when Queen Aelin takes her throne and we can all serve under her and let her take over Aderlin? Guys, this is Kale's worst nightmare. He's already trying so hard to, like, yeah, I want Aelin's help, but only as Selena, and I want nothing to do with her as a queen, except for I don't want her to hurt Aderlin, but I need her to help Aderlin, but I also don't trust her because I think she's gonna hurt it. You know, are you picking up right now? He has zero trust. He has so much trust issues. He's extremely skeptical. The fact that a leader in the rebel movement is suggesting this is kind of horrifying to him. And we're just going to leave Kale to sit with that for a minute, and we're actually going to jump to Aelin's POV. We're not actually going to see anything here, but we do learn something. Late at night, when Rowan is asleep, Aelin has been sneaking out of bed, getting fully armed up to the teeth, and sneaking out almost every single night. Chapter 36, I'm gonna need you to hang tight with me for this one because I'll tell you that this is probably, I think it's my 4th time reading the series for this entire plot video series. And this is something that only until I was like deeply dissecting it did I fully understand what was actually happening here. You know, sometimes a scene doesn't really make sense to you, but you understand the end result, so you just move on. This was that for me. So if that was you and chapter 36 was like, wait, what? I got you. Let's break it down. Aelin, we learn, is going Valg hunting at night, or at least it's what it seems like she's doing. There's this whole scene where basically Aelin meets up with Lysandra in the sewage system, and they start having this super vague conversation about keys. What keys do we know about? And then also, like, talking about where Aelin wanted to hide said keys. So what we're learning is actually happening here is that this is a totally staged conversation. Aelin intentionally was walking around to get her scent out in the air because she is trying to attract Lorcan. Then once she was sure that Lorcan was actually on her trail and spying on her, she met up with Lysandra, staged having the keys, and talked about wanting to hide it in a particular area in the sewage system, wrapped up a fake word key in a cloak, and then threw it into one of the, remember how I said there's like these little coves off to the side in the sewage system? They like throw it in there and they walk away. They then book it away and then hide at a distance to watch Lorcan go into that little cove. So basically they staged this entire thing to get Lorcan to go into that cove. Now what's so stinking funny about all of this is that that cove is the nest of Valg soldiers that Aelin found during all of her Valg hunting. Aelin literally like let Lorcan think that he was spying on her and that she had the word keys and he knew where she was gonna hide it, but in all reality it was basically like the funniest prank that she could ever pull on him. Like, she's just messing around. From Aelin's POV, there is an explosion of yelling and clashing steel, and then she decides to head back to the apartment for the night, feeling pretty smug about herself. Honestly, this whole scene kills me and I absolutely love it, and whenever this becomes like a TV series or movie series, this is one of those scenes that I am dying to watch because I know it's going to have me like crying tears of joy. But here's the problem. Lorcan very quickly obviously realized exactly what she was doing. He comes to find her and he does sneak up on her a lot faster than Aelin thought. Like, she thought he was going to be preoccupied down there for a while. He took care of them pretty quickly, and so he sneaks up behind her and pulls a knife to her throat, reveals that there were 6 Valg commanders down there, pretty strong Valg influenced ones, and he killed every single one of them. And he's holding a knife to Aelin's throat, basically being like, give me a reason not to kill you right now. Like, he is ticked off when Rowan shows up, okay? This is about to get real spicy. Rowan is debating on killing Lorcan, but Lorcan reveals that Queen Maeve said that if he does not come back from this mission of retrieving the word key and come back to Dornale alive, then she's gonna side with the King of Adarlan to take down Aelins. And that is something they cannot risk. So they decide they're gonna let Lorcan go. Goodness gracious, somehow Rowan scares Lorcan away. I actually forgot to take notes on the details of that, but for some reason, Lorcan decides tonight's not the night, and so he leaves. And Rowan is very upset. He recognizes that Aelin can handle her own, and she's very independent, and he loves that about her. But here's the thing. She's also his queen, and he is blood sworn to protect her, and so the fact that was not aware, one, of what she was doing, and two, that she had a literal knife to her throat, and if he had not shown up, Lorcan might have killed her. Also, remember what I said in part, I believe, 2 or 3, Lorcan could beat Rowan in a fight. Like, Rowan's not really sure that he would win. It's not helping with his confidence of his ability to protect Aelin entirely on his own. Chapter 37 is a very dark and depressing chapter, so naturally it is in Valg Dorian's POV, and I think for now I'm actually going to switch to this art, just because it's hard to sometimes separate like real Dorian from Valg Dorian, so I feel like visually, if you are watching this on YouTube or if you're watching the video on Spotify and these pictures help you, then I just wanted to make that differentiation. But if you're just listening to this on Spotify without photos, that's not relevant to you. And also, like, congratulations. You don't need photos. Like, there's so many stinking characters in this book, so I very much admire you for not needing the photos. I don't think it could be me. But anyways, this is a short chapter. We learn that the Valgan Dorian loves to go down to the dungeons where they're actually torturing men in the cells. Do you remember all those empty cells that Aelin found in Crown of Midnight? Well, they're all full now, full of men being absolutely tortured. And you know what? It's part of this Valg and Dorian's body daily ritual to go down there and feed on the darkness of basically all of the torture that's happening down there, because he's feeding on these people's pain. This alone is contributing to Dorian fading away more and more into the darkness inside of his body. Chapter 38, and I need you to hear me when I say, and I know I try not to include too many personal opinions in these videos, I try to keep them as factual as possible, but this chapter, like, I know so many iconic things happen in this book, but this chapter, to me, is, like, one of the best things ever. I am obsessed with this chapter. So, it's the next evening, and Aelin, Rowan, Aedion, and Lysandra are all having dinner together, and they're just messing around, having a good time. It's very cutesy, fun vibes. No one's bickering, which is so rare, and it's really nice because, you know, life is rough for all of them right now. Like, the least they could have is a fun dinner party with their friends. Lysandra turns to Rowan and says, "I like your fangs." Seems pretty legit, right? To which Rowan replies with the wildest thing. "Are you studying them so you can replicate them when you take my form, shapeshifter?" This is how we find out that Lysandra is a shapeshifter, okay? Let's get some of her backstory, okay? So she shares her backstory. By the way, no one knows this, not even Erebin, okay? So Erebin knew Aelin's secret, that she was the rightful heir to the throne of Terrasen, but he didn't know that Lysandra was a shapeshifter. So she was 6 years old when she found out. Also, she knew that her father was a shapeshifter, but she never actually knew who her father was, and her mother didn't tell her. She's also a full shapeshifter. So this is a little differentiation. A half shapeshifter or like a partial shifter can only really change part of like human form. So maybe they can change the color of their hair or their eyes or make certain body parts bigger or smaller. Like they can make those kinds of appearance changes, but a full shapeshifter can change into anything. Like she can change into a cat for all she cares about. Like she can change into a frog. She can change into a mouse. She can be a stinking grizzly bear. She can be whatever she wants. So before the anti-magic triangle came up, the king banished magic, making it illegal. And once magic became illegal, Lysandra's mother kicked her out of the house. She didn't even want to be caught housing a shapeshifter. And then when she was 7, she decided to use her abilities to be the most beautiful child she could be because she found out that people were willing to throw a child on the street more money as like donations and charity if she was stunningly beautiful. So she transformed herself to be like the most beautiful 7-year-old she could possibly be. The only issue is that shortly after she took the form of this beautiful 7-year-old, the anti-magic triangle went up and she has been stuck in this form for the entirety of her life up until this day. So basically, a side point to make here is that what she looks like now, like this, like what we know her to look like, is not actually what she really looks like. She doesn't actually remember what she looked like before she was 7 years old, so even if she wanted to change back, she can't. Because shapeshifters have to like truly visualize it. They can't just say like, oh, I want to turn into this thing. Like they have to have a really strong visual for what that looks like in order to make that shift. So because she doesn't remember what she looks like as a child, she can never change back to who she was. But she got stuck as this beautiful, beautiful child, and naturally when Clarice found her, whose literal job is to find beautiful children off the side of the street and then force them into lives of courtesans, naturally when she saw the most beautiful 7-year-old in existence, she had to have her and basically stole her off the streets. And then we know the rest of Lysandra's story from Assassin's Blade. So she spills her guts to all of them. She tells them all this backstory, and honestly, I love how Rowan's response was like, whenever you're able to shift again, what would you shift into? And I just thought that was a really cute question. Instead of like harping on all the bad things that happened to her, he's kind of like giving her hope for the future of like tapping into that magic again. And she says, anything with claws and fangs. Good answer. I love that. That's a good answer. She also briefly mentioned something. I think it was like a tabby cat or something, but she mentions how when she was younger, before the anti-magic triangle went up, when she wasn't this like beautiful girl, she loved to change into like a little tabby cat of sorts. So I thought that was cute as well. Lysandra is really nervous about how Aylin's going to respond, but Aylin just says that she's become a far more interesting and entertaining friend than she thought she was. So that's a good answer for Lysandra, and she's happy with that. Now we're actually going to cut to the chase because apparently Lysandra actually does have something she needs to discuss with them before our lovely fun dinner party is over, which by the way just got significantly more interesting with that whole shapeshifter plot twist. But Arobynn is summoning Aylin for a dinner date at the Assassin's Keep. And she has like a special former paper invite from Arobynn, and she is allowed 2 +1s. And this is basically just his way to flex that he is aware that there are 2 people staying with her. And then, so there's this actual really funny detail, okay? He leaves this almond oil perfume with the invite, and he says that he wants her to wear it when she comes over for dinner. Naturally, this is Arobynn, you know, being Arobynn. Like, he wants to stake his claim because he feels like he owns her, and he wants her to, like, put this oil on her body so she can, like, smell like he wants her to. And it's very disturbing. Like, if you think about it, this man has been watching her since she was literally 8 years old, and he is literally obsessed with her. Obviously, we know he's not obsessed with her as a person. He's obsessed with the power she represents. He's obsessed with the fact that she's heir to the throne, and he really just loves the fact that he can boss her around and she will just do it because he actually has more power than her, despite the fact that she's technically supposed to be a really powerful human being. So it's all very disgusting and we absolutely hate it. Arobynn, you are trash. But I just wanted to explain that as well. Also, I'm allergic to almonds. So to me, him loving almond oil is just very fitting. That was such an unnecessary detail, but moving on. Oh, also, this is another thing, because it's also showing that he knows that both of the boys that she is with right now are fae. All their 5 senses are elevated, including their nose. So it's also kind of this thing where it's like it's a really strong smelling oil, and she's like, he's also messing with Adian and Rowan. So that's also just like this whole side thing. I'm laughing because we'll get to why I'm laughing later, okay? So Aylin is mostly focused on getting her mother's amulet from Arobynn, so she's like, you know what, I'm willing to play by his rules, both of you will come, I will wear the almond oil, but before we can go over there, we need to get this Valg soldier. And this dinner date's tomorrow night, so we gotta get this Valg soldier like now. Chapter 39, the first place that Aylin and Rowan think to go is the nest where Lorcan kind of went loose on those 6 Valg commanders, but apparently he was very thorough and none of them made it out. They were hoping someone would be like unconscious or something, but no, they're all very, very dead. So they gotta go Valg hunting. But while they're Valg hunting, Aelin reveals to Rowan that leading Lorcan down to this Valg nest was more than just a prank, although it was a very good prank, and I absolutely loved it. But she wanted to know if a word hound could be killed. So 6 Valg commanders, but also, fun fact, there was a word hound in there as well, and Lorcan did kill it. So word hounds can be killed. Lorcan knows how to kill them. Do we know how he killed him? Not necessarily. Take that information, lock it in your brain. Something tells me that that's good information to keep in your back pocket for future. Just a thought. Another fun little added bonus to that is that these word hounds are like the king's special little creatures that he uses as conduits to communicate through the sewage system with the Valg commanders. So the funny thing about this is that the king is now going to have Lorcan hunted down, 1, because he killed one of his beloved word hounds, but 2, because it means that there is a Fey male in his kingdom. And that's also going to take the king off Rowan's scent for a little bit, and he's going to focus far more on Lorcan. Because if you think about it, like, it was kind of inevitable that eventually Rowan's Fayness would be scented out by one of the Valg or someone who worked for the king. So it's good to have them all focused on Lorcan for now. So this is really a multifaceted plan, because then on top of that, this is going to leave the sewage systems clear so that Aelin can sneak through the sewage system towards the castle, because she plans to blow up the clock tower from within the sewage system underneath it to try to blow out this anti-magic triangle. Because remember, in Crown of Midnight, Kael's the one who figures out that if you blow out one of the towers, then the anti-magic triangle falls apart. So they continue Valg hunting. A couple hours later, her and Rowan find someone. They start to interrogate him down in the sewage system, and this is very vaguely written in the books, and it is for a reason, so I'm going to be vague to describe it here, but when we get to the part in the future why it's important, why it was vague now, I will draw connections to now in the future. If that might not have made any sense to you at all, but don't worry if my explanation here doesn't make the scene any more clear for you, if it was confusing for you at the start. We will actually talk about this scene again in the future in more detail. All you need to know is that they are interrogating this Valg commander, and it's crazy because he's pulling a Schmeagol on them. Like, he's basically going back and forth between who he actually is and the Valg evil version of him that's inside of him. So the good guard, who's not under the Valg influence, we found out his name is Stephen, okay? So Aelin was able to ask him what his name was. He said it was Stephen. And whenever Stephen pops up, she tries to ask as many questions as possible and basically says that the Valg Endorian is a Valg prince, which we already kind of knew. And then Stephen begs Aelin to put him out of his misery. So she decides to cut him a deal. That is all I'm going to say about that scene. We're actually going to discuss the deal that they made in this moment in a couple chapters. So later that night, Rowan is sleeping, and she sneaks out to do one last thing, of course. Rowan, although, is awake when she gets back, and he's really mad because she's been so secretive, and it's literally his job to protect her, and she keeps putting herself in danger, and she keeps reassuring him that it's fine, and he's like, look, I get that you're used to doing this all alone, but you don't have to do it all alone anymore. And frankly, since you're kind of the sole heir to your throne, maybe you should not be doing these things alone. Just a thought. She changes the conversation though, and she says that she wants to ask him a favor, and there's one last thing that she wants to do before they go to Arobyn's dinner, which is now less than 24 hours away. She wants to go see Sam's grave. Remember in part 3, we talked about how Arobyn gave her the location of Sam's grave. Of course he says yes. He immediately takes her there, and he gives her space to say goodbye to him. He recognizes that this is like a very intimate thing, so he is kind of like being a guard dog. And I actually wrote down her goodbye to Sam. For all you Sam lovers out there, this is her goodbye to Sam. Every day I miss you, and I wonder what you would have made of all this. Made of me. I think you would have made a wonderful king. I will get through this without crying. I think they would have liked you more than me, actually. I never told you how I felt, but I loved you, and I think a part of me might always love you. Maybe you were my mate, and I never knew it. Maybe I'll spend the rest of my life wondering about that. Maybe I'll see you again in the afterworld, and then I'll know for sure. But until then, I'll miss you, and I'll wish you were here. And then she tells Sam that tonight she is going to settle his life debt. And who's responsible for Sam's death? Arobyn. Then we jump to Rowan's POV, and he's like, oh dang, we're killing Arabin tonight. Chapter 40, naturally I know you're dying to know how in the world Aelin is going to pull off this plan, but we're actually going to take a break from that plot. I am so sorry. The timing of this is bonkers, but we're actually going to jump to Elide's POV. She is working in the kitchens, and I'll remind you that she is on a mission. Remember, she got that poison from Manon. Sarah J. Maas set it up to seem like she wanted the poison to poison her Uncle Vernon, but it's actually a non-fatal poison that's just going to make the drinker of the poison sick, and she's going to give it to the laundress responsible for taking the towels and sheets to the Yellowlegs breeding den so that she can volunteer in her place. So she's in the kitchens and she intentionally poisons the food of this laundress. And sure enough, the next day the laundress is too sick to do her job and no one wants to volunteer because people have heard the screams coming from that room and no one wants to go in there and see what's going on. So Elide volunteers and sure enough, she is the one to deliver the dirty clothes to the Yellowlegs breeding den. She starts her shift by getting the dirty laundry and apparently it's all covered in like barf. Ew, I hate that word. It's all covered in vomit. And after hours of cleaning and scrubbing and the most cleaning she's ever done on a load of laundry, Elide folds up everything to go behind enemy lines and spy for her wing leader by taking down the clean clothes. And honestly, it was horrible. She describes it as cold. She heard moans of pain, of terror, and despair. It's honestly the most traumatizing thing. So Elide runs back and reports everything to Manon. And I'm just going to read it directly from the book here. The thing that opened the door was a beautiful man, a man with golden hair and a collar around his neck. Who might that be? I'm not going to tell you yet. I'm going to reveal that later. But like, you know who this person is. So I'll give you a moment to think about it. But he was not a man. There was nothing human in his eyes. I'd pretend to fall so I could buy myself more time to see who would open the door. When he saw me on the ground, he smiled at me and the darkness leaked out of him. Then she reveals that she was able to peek into the room and saw that the Yellowlegs had already bred the creatures and some of them were already pregnant again and going through the experiment a second time, which obviously was not a part of Manon's agreement with the Duke. Then she says that the babies have snouts, teeth, fangs, and skin that look like black diamond. These creatures, I'm going to hold off on telling you more about them until Sarah J. Maas tells you more about them, but if they don't give you heebie-jeebies yet, just wait till I find some art to share with you and wait until we talk a little bit more about these creatures because, oh my word, they haunt my nightmares. I'll just tell you right now, they haunt my nightmares. Elide also shares that the pregnant Yellowlegs, guys, I'll remind you, I've said this before and I'll say it again, and I really don't want to get demonetized because someone reports me, okay? If you are squeamish, if you cannot handle dark material, this is not for you. Please back out now. Like, I really don't want to get demonetized because someone's mad at me for literally just relaying the plot of this book. This book contains sensitive material. If you are a sensitive person, this is not the book for you and you should click out now. This is your last warning. Okay, so these pregnant Yellowlegs are chained to tables and screaming and yelling and crying. They're basically being tortured. Like, it's a horrible thing. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but when Elide is reporting this to Manon, Asterin is in the room. Now, I will remind you that Asterin has been very against this from the start, so vocally so that Manon had to debunk her in her position in the 13 clan. So Asterin absolutely loses it on Manon, okay? And it's bad enough that Manon replaced her as her third, but now she has to be punished according to the witch traditions because she defied the coven leader publicly in front of other people, which Manon didn't want to have to do, but she's like, well, it's witch tradition, like, you lost it at me in a public way, and now you have to face the punishment for it. So Manon dismisses Sorrel and Asterin, so it's just her and Elide. And Elide's like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you serving the king? Like, you clearly have an issue with this. Like, why aren't you doing anything? And Manon's just like, you don't get it. To which Elide shares more of her backstory. I know we got some of her backstory, but this is, and I'm doing direct quotes here because these are 3 paragraphs that I think are really important to know for like why Elide is the way she is, and everything that she's going to do in the future I feel like is explained really well by these 3 paragraphs, so listen closely. 10 years ago, my parents were murdered. My father was executed on a butchering block in front of thousands, but my mother died defending Aelin Galathynius heir to the throne of Terrasen. She bought Aelin time to run. They followed Aelin's track to the frozen river where they said she must have fallen in and drowned. So guys, do you remember Aelin's backstory? We learned a lot about it in Heir of Fire. Little baby Aelin crawled into her parents' bed because she was scared. Turns out both of her parents were dead. And then this female servant came out, freaked out, grabbed Aelin, tried to hide her, and then when she realized there was an assassin there to kill Aelin, she told Aelin to run and basically tried to stall the assassin and got murdered by the assassin. But it gave Aelin time to get to the river. So that is Elaide's mother, okay? The lady who saved Aelin's life is Elaide's mother, okay? That connection has been made. Fantastic. Then, obviously, we know that she didn't actually drown and die in the river and that Erebin picked her up and she's, everything from Assassin's Blade till now. Elide does not know that, okay? For all she knows, Aelin is dead. Also, keep in mind, she's not in Rifthold. There's a lot of buzz right now after what Aelin did in Heir of Fire that, oh, the Queen of Terrasen's back, and she's, this fire fae, but, Elide's in the middle of the mountains in the middle of nowhere, so of course she has not heard that, okay? Anyways, back to what Elide says. But you see, Aelin had fire magic. She could have survived the cold. And Aelin had never really liked me or played with me because I was so shy. But I never believed them when she said she was dead. Every day since then, I've told myself that she got away and that she was still out there biding her time, growing up, growing strong so that she might one day come to Terrasen. And you are my enemy, because if she returns, she will fight you. She's saying that to Manon. But for 10 years, until I came here, I endured Uncle Vernon because of her, because of the hope that she got away, and my mother's sacrifice was not in vain. I thought that one day Aelin would come to save me, would remember I existed and rescue me from my tower. Even though she never came, even though I'm here now, I cannot let go of that. And I think that is why you obey, because you have been hoping every day of your miserable, hideous life that you'll get to go home. First of all, I feel like this is the first time we see Elide's actual personality showing through. We learn a little bit who she is, why she is the way she is. Also, that's just some crazy stuff that we learn about her connections with Aelin, right? And then also we're really excited for her because we're like, yes, Aelin is alive. And then you feel horrible because you're like, who's going to tell this girl that Aelin is alive? But also, this is a moment where Manon's really taken aback and she's starting to really second guess things. So Manon turns to her and she says, do you think monsters are born or monsters are made? That is interesting. Manon's not the kind of person that would ask a question like that, which makes you wonder if what Elide said really hit home with Manon, okay? But Elide just says, girl, that's something you need to figure out for yourself, okay? That is not my responsibility. You need to answer that question for yourself. Chapter 41, this is a short and low-key kind of funny chapter. Aelin's getting ready for the dinner at Erebin's, and she gets all covered in that almond oil, which, ew. My skin's, itching and breaking out in hives just thinking about that. But do you remember in, part 3, I told you that Rowan was, messing around and going through Aelin's clothes, and he found this black dress with all these gold detailing on it, and he was like, this is my favorite dress from your entire collection. She's wearing that dress. So although she has to wear Erebin's oils in order for this to go smoothly, she decides that, you know what? I can't necessarily control that, but what I can control is that the dress is something that Rowan chose, which I thought was really stinking cute. And Rowan thinks it's cute too. In fact, he does drool over her a little bit, but you know what? We don't have time. We don't have time for any of this, kids, because we gotta go over to the Assassin's Keep. Chapter 42, things are getting real. I need to stop smiling so big or my cheeks are gonna hurt by the end of this chapter, but this is just honestly of all of the chapters, all the best ones of Queen of Shadows are really just smack there next to each other, and they just all happen to be in this video. So we're greeted by Erebin as we go up to the Assassin's Keep, and it's taking everything in Rowan and Adian not to kill him on the spot. Also, notice I didn't say this is any particular person's POV because it jumps around 15 different times, so this is just in everyone's POV, okay? Anyone who is at the Assassin's Keep right now, this chapter's in their POV at some point or another. But this is what sends me, okay? So Erebin greets Aelin, and he's like, oh, I'm so happy you wore the oil. You smell amazing, whatever. But as he's greeting Rowan, whatever is culturally accepted in Aderlin, Rowan goes, thank you for the oil. My skin was dry. Guys, Rowan whispers to Aelin, he's like, He didn't say only you had to wear it. Guys, Rowan is wearing the almond oil, and that actually cracks me up. I'm screaming. This is why I love Rowan. He didn't want her to feel alone in this, and he also kind of wanted to like kind of humble Arobynn a little bit, and I think it definitely worked because Arobynn apparently makes a face that Aelin has to like restrain herself from laughing at, which is amazing. But they decide before dinner they're just gonna get down to business, so Arobynn takes them down to the dungeons for them to put their Valg soldier in. I will say more in a bit about that Valg soldier particularly. And because Arobynn is a horrible person, he conveniently decides that of all of the cells in the dungeon, the one that they absolutely need to continue their business in is the one where he held Sam's body when Celaena first saw Sam's body after he had been tortured and dumped into the Assassin's Keep. So this is another, like, you know, stab at Aelin, basically. And to make things even worse, she's already emotionally vulnerable, trying not to be, and Arobynn says that he doesn't want the boys in the room. Although they hesitate, Aelin decides, you know what, like, yeah, actually this should just be us. But you know what, they're gonna trust her and they're gonna stay in back. So they get in there and they start to torture this Valg soldier for information. And you know what, he has some really loose lips. The Valg soldier lets a lot of things go, okay? So he tells them that the king is controlling all the soldiers with these rings and basically explains how the control works. Aelin then suggests that because he's told them everything they need to know, and they can't exactly release him back into the wild, they should just kill him. And Arobynn agrees. So Aelin pulls a Queen of Hearts and goes off with his head. Then they go upstairs for dinner, and things are perfectly awkwardly tense because this is just the whole thing. Okay, I made a mistake. I will be fully honest. I don't believe I have, up until this moment, mentioned that Aelin and Rowan can mind speak. If you have read any other Sarah J. Maas books, yes, it is just like it is in other series. Aelin and Rowan are able to communicate to each other through their brains. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this became a thing when they found out they were Caranom. So this is part of their Caranom connection. And that's where they're magically compatible, and so they can charge each other. Basically, their magic is mates. Not them are mates, their magic is mates. If you forget about that, I go very deep into it in the Air of Fire plot breakdowns. But no crucial conversation is happening here, but I do want you to know that they are mind speaking during this dinner, and Arobynn kind of picks up that there's definitely like something going on there, and Rowan's basically just the entire time trying to comfort Aelin. That is just his number one goal there, because she's definitely on edge, but she's also like trying to pretend to be unfazed by everything that just happened. It's all very awkward and tense, but they're all sitting down and they're enjoying dinner together. Chapter 43, as if this dinner wasn't already awkward enough, Arobynn decides to confront Aelin about trying to sabotage him while she's back in town. First thing he brings up is that she got the vaults shut down, which is one of his biggest investments. He's also mad because he thinks that she dyed her hair intentionally to look like Hinsel Cormac, which apparently is one of Arobynn's most loyal investors. She hasn't been subtle about a lot of things that she's done, especially when she rescued Aedion, apparently. Like, she let her red hair flash out. So a lot of people think that Hinsel was a part of rescuing Aedion, so Hinsel's been getting a lot of slack, and so he's been coming at Arobynn basically saying like, hey, if that's one of your assassins, like, she's impersonating me and she's ruining my good name. So also one of Arobynn's biggest investors is basically no longer interested in working with him because it has people now thinking that Arobynn's part of this rebel movement, which he also does not want his name tied to, because he has the king in his pocket. So basically we find out that she's been doing a lot of things recently that, although we think are just for funsies, she's been pretty intentional about them. All this to say, Arobynn wants to know, what does she want in order for her to stop sabotaging him? It's also kind of funny because we weren't even really aware that she was sabotaging him. Like, there are some things she was doing that we didn't really know why she was doing it, and some things we thought we knew, or we thought we knew like the one reason why she was doing it. So it's funny to see like all the different ways she's been scheming to just kind of like ruin Arobynn's dynasty, which is amazing. So she says that she wants to take this conversation to a separate room, so it's just her and Arobynn. Obviously, Aedion and Rowan have their like super fae hearing still, even though it's not like great in the anti-magic triangle. Like, they still have better than the average human, so they're listening. Also, I think I forgot to mention this. Lysandra is a part of this dinner party, but it's funny because there's this whole dynamic where Aelin and Lysandra have to pretend like they hate each other. Anyways, that's a side point. It's irrelevant that she's there. So just remember that. It's not relevant right now, but she's at this awkward, intense dinner party. Aedion and Rowan and Lysandra stay at the table while Arobynn and Aelin go into the next room. Aelin tells Arobynn that she wants her family amulet. He's trying to do this whole thing like, why do you hate me? Don't you see that everything I've ever done is for you? Dude, be so for real. Go away. But he takes it a step further because she's like, just give me the amulet. Like, that's all I want. Like, I don't want any of your crap anymore. And he just says, no, like, even these Valg rings, like, I'm only trying to figure out what the king's up to for you so that we can take the king down together. And she's just like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I don't need you. So he's like, you know what? Okay, that's fine. He takes the amulet off. So he's literally wearing it. And mind you, she checked to see if he was wearing it that one night that she ran into him in the pits in like one of the first couple chapters of this book, and he wasn't wearing it. So she knows that he knows that that's why she's there. So she's like, okay, yeah, this was all just a game to you, but whatever. It kind of solidifies to her that she made the right decision, right? So he hands it over to her and she puts it on her neck and she's wearing it. And then she's like, you know what? I think I am going to come over tomorrow and tell me your plan for killing the king and maybe we will work together. Interesting. And then this is what's bonkers. This is the most earth-shattering thing in this entire book, probably. But he goes to take her hand as a gesture to like say goodbye or whatever. And then before he lets go of her hand, he says, I'm going to enjoy having you back. And he slips the Valg ring onto her finger. Chapter 44, Arobynn is messed up, okay? He decides that he's gonna test out his new power because he just put this ring on Aelin, and according to the Valg soldier he just had tortured and killed downstairs, like, she'll do whatever he wants. He's so messed up, like, he's making her tell him that she loves him and like all this stuff, and like she is. It's honestly, it's like the most disturbing game of Simon Says you've ever seen. And then he commands her to like continue as if nothing happened. Don't tell anyone about the ring. Don't tell anyone that Aelin is under Arobynn's control. Like, just go back to your apartment. Don't tell Rowan and Aedion. And just come tomorrow to talk about like the king's plans and we can go over next steps together. And here's the crazy thing. Remember how I mentioned Aedion and Rowan have special Fae hearing senses? So they literally overheard the entire conversation and they're freaking out. Like, they do not know what to do. So sure enough, like, they get into a carriage all together and they're both just kind of looking at her and she's like super quiet the whole way home and they're like freaking out. They're like, what are we gonna do? Like, the future queen of Terrasen is literally a slave to Arobynn. Like, how are we even going to recover from this? So they get all the way to the apartment and Rowan and Aedion are like, we need to decide what in the world to do, when she turns around, slips the ring off her finger and says, so that was what he wanted. I was honestly expecting something grander. Guys, she was faking the whole time. Now remember about that super vague scene with the Valg soldier. Let's jump back to that, because when Aelin and Rowan were interrogating that Valg soldier and they said, let's cut a deal, they put a fake ring. Remember, Aedion had a fake Valg ring because he could tell that there was something suspicious with the rings, right? So he had a fake one, right? So they took Aedion's old fake Valg ring, basically, and they put it on this guy. And they told Stephen, the good guard, who, when he wasn't under the Valg influence, told him, like, we will put you out of your misery and we'll make it quick. So Aelin, that's why she beheaded him instead of like drawing it out like Aelin maybe would have in the past when she was Selena, right? So she makes it quick, and the deal is that he lies to Arobynn basically, and then she would give him a quick and clean kill, and then he could die doing something honorable and good to help take the king down. So Stephen, Commander Stephen, thank you for your service. So Arobynn put a fake ring on Aelin for the sole purpose of controlling her. And then this was also kind of the thing where she was like, you know what? This was the last thing, like, for me to 100% feel okay. Just, like, murdering this man. So, good for her. Then they kind of changed conversations to the amulet. And Rowan's asking, like, how can she be sure it's real? And she's like, oh, trust me, I can tell. Like, this thing is absolutely just imbuing Valg power. She's honestly really confused why Rowan can't really feel it, because he can sense the Valg soldiers. She is hyper aware of the fact that this amulet is definitely a word key because of the kind of like power that's like almost singing to her in a way. So they're looking at it together, and it is covered in a bunch of word marks, and they are able to decipher some of them, including Brandon's mark. Remember, that is the bastard's mark that shines on Aylin's forehead, like that the 2 times that it has happened. Okay, now there's this really weird thing that happens here, so we're gonna like take a break from the amulet for a second. Something really odd happens, and you're not going to get any answers now, and that's fine. Just like get used to that, frankly. So Aylin starts to wrap up the word key amulet because she decides that she needs to hide it. And then she had a fake one made. One of like Lysandra's jewelers was able to make a fake copy of the amulet based off of Selena's memory. So they're keeping that. Did I just call her Selena? Aylin. But as she's going to hide the real amulet underneath some floorboards, there's like this weird moment where her and Rowan like accidentally merge, and they both kind of look at each other like, did you feel that? They kind of write it off as like a Karanom thing that they just haven't really tapped into or figured out yet, and then they decide to move on because they have some bigger fish to fry at the moment. Later that night, Rowan finds that Aylin is struggling to sleep because apparently while they were at the dinner, remember Lysandra was there, I told you it was relevant, she slipped Lysandra a note while they were at the dinner, and basically it said like that she can kill Arabin. Like, she basically gave her permission. She's like, all right, he's all yours. Go for it. Then she shifts topics and she asks Rowan to go find Lorcan and basically see if he's been able to kill any more of the word hounds. And naturally, he agrees, and then they have a really sweet and tender conversation where, you know, he's trying to comfort her and he's like, hey, you're doing a great job. Like, I will never stop to remind you guys that she's literally 19 when all this is happening. So he never stops to remind her that she's doing great and to keep up the good work. Yeah, and it's a really sweet and tender moment. They're both very like stubborn people who very much have built up walls their entire life. So whenever they're like cute and vulnerable with each other, like it's worth noting. But now let's jump to Lysandra's POV because she is watching Arabin sleep. And all she can think about is the note that Aylin slipped her that said, he's all yours. And while Lysandra's standing over Arabin's sleeping body, she's thinking about how disturbing and disgusting it is that after Aylin and Adian and Rowan left, she overheard Arabin talking with some of the assassins about a plan to have Rowan killed because he didn't want to share Aylin with anyone. So it's in this moment that Lysandra decides, for Wesley, and for Sam, and for Aylin, and for herself, it's time for Arabin to go. So she slit his throat. That is a bonkers way for me to end part 4, but I think we're going to end it here today just to keep it short. This one went a little longer than I was wanting to. But don't worry, because next Monday I'm going to be putting Queen of Shadows part 5 up. In the meantime, you should definitely get caught up if you are not already. And of course, you should definitely subscribe so you get notified whenever I post a new bookish video.